Last weekend, the movie Heretic came out in theaters. This is a new horror film about two sister missionaries who get held hostage by someone they believe to have been an honest seeker of truth. Out of curiosity, I went and saw this film with my husband, and in today's episode, we are going to summarize it for you so that you don't have to see it for yourselves. We're going to talk about the aspects of our faith that were accurate and some that maybe weren't, and share our responses to the main criticisms that Hugh Grant poses against our beliefs. If you listen to my podcast for spiritual insight, this probably is a good episode for you to skip. However, if you stick around, I promise that you will be well entertained. Welcome to Blonde Apologist. Well, hello and welcome to a new episode. Today, I'm joined again by my husband, Tanner.
Hello.
Welcome back.
It's good to be back.
A little sooner than expected, but I wanted to get a quick episode out about the movie Heretic that came out, and we went and saw it together, so I thought I'm just going to have Tanner come on and do this episode with me again. So let's start by just giving a brief overview of what the movie was about. Do you want me to do that, and then you can give more of a review of the movie?
I think we should go through the movie because just from a movie perspective, I would say I'm into horror.
Yes, and it's funny, if you listen to my very first episode, you know that I hate horror, and I only went and saw this movie so that we could talk about it on the podcast. But honestly, I was so intrigued the whole movie because of the way that it revolves around our faith and the role that it plays. So
the representation is cool. It is kind of cool to see your culture on display in something that isn't about Mormonism.
I know. I really can't even believe it's a real movie because it felt so spot on with so much of our culture and so much of our beliefs that it's like someone in Utah didn't just make this for fun. Like a real production team went behind this story and wrote it. There's
like the South Park episode, but that is like specific about Mormonism, and they're the butt of the joke. Mm-hmm. There's like we're occasionally thrown out as jokes in pop culture, but this was just like the two main characters are Mormon, and here's a story unrelated to Mormonism, kind of.
But like, let's try to deconstruct their faith.
Yeah, it was more like they picked them to kind of make a statement on religion in general.
For sure. I don't think that the producers or the directors or writers, whoever had it out for Mormons, I think it was meant to just be religion in general. American religion, probably more than anything, like Western religion.
So spoilers.
Yeah,
if you want to see the movie, then you should not listen starting now because we're going to
Or if you want to see the movie and want to know when it gets scary, I can tell you that.
It never gets scary. From like, if I were to rate this out of 10 for a horror movie, I give it like a 4 out of 10.
Yeah.
I feel like, I like all horror. I like slasher movies. I like slow burns. I like jump scares. And
it was none of that.
It was kind of like a slow burn, but for slow burns to
not a good payout.
Be good, they have to have a good payoff at the end. And it just like fell completely flat at the end.
Yeah.
I haven't gone on to like Reddit and YouTube reviews of this movie because I want these opinions to be my own. Mm-hmm. But I'm excited to go and see what reviewers think after we record this.
Well, I kind of wish I would have done that because I'm so curious of what a person's perception of it who has no religion in their life, especially like not Mormonism. Like I wonder if they were intrigued or interested at all, because that was the only thing that kept me going. Like the story is meh, the acting's incredible, but like I was there and I was intrigued because I was like, what else are they going to say about my faith?
Yeah, I mean, so let's just start at the beginning because it was interesting to be a Utah Mormon in a Utah movie theater watching this movie because I feel like our theater was laughing probably more than a non-Utah, non-Mormon theater.
Absolutely.
There was a guy in the front row that I recognized, and he pulled his hood up over his head. He's like a prominent businessman, and I think he even holds like a pretty, prominent calling. And he went and saw it by himself, and he kind of sat in the theater, came after it's like right after it started, and left right as the credits rolled. I don't think he wanted anybody to know he was there.
Well, like, I think it makes sense. Like, I mean, that's why I went there, to just, like, be in the know of, like, what's being said about your faith in pop culture. Like, I think that is pretty normal to, like, just want to understand. If I was a church leader, I would go see it for that same reason.
Yeah, and the cool part, it starts in, it's two sister missionaries in your mission.
Yeah, that's what's crazy, is this is my mission. So.
Vancouver, Canada.
Yeah.
There's a Vancouver, Washington, too, right?
Yeah, there is.
Vancouver, Canada.
Well, I actually don't know where the setting's supposed to take place. I know they filmed it in my mission.
Well, yeah, then if they don't say it and they film it there, then that's where it takes place probably.
Yeah.
But it starts with two sister missionaries, Sister Paxton and Sister
Barnes,
on a park bench. And for comedic effect, they are talking about Magnum condoms.
And if they're real or not.
That penises
couldn't be that big.
And so everybody in the theater is kind of giggling because they're having this discussion that you probably would never expect a missionary to have. But I feel like it's not crazy to have conversations that skew towards sex on your mission with your companion, especially after you've been with them for 2 or 3 months. You're curious. You want to know what other people think about that stuff? Does that happen with sister missionaries?
No, I'm trying to think. I don't know if we had conversations around sex ever. But the way that it's more realistic to me is that they were at the park bench and that was the ad in front of them. I could definitely see myself like looking at an ad and being like, look at this ad.
Yeah, it was the whole park bench was like had a condom on it.
Yeah, so like that seems more realistic. Like I don't think they would just bring it up like casually talking about sex.
And then for comedic effect, one of the Sister Barnes.
No, not for comedic effect. I think to make her look like she's brainwashed. I don't think this part of the story was for comedic effect.
See, that's funny because I just thought it was so funny, but I don't think the brethren would think it's funny. So maybe you're right.
No, yeah. I think it was meant to make her look like she's ignorant to like...
Yeah, she's talking about watching porn and feeling the spirit. That she could tell that the people in the porn regretted their decision, and that's a moment when she knew that the church was true.
It sounds so horrible, like when you say it out loud.
Just wait. As we describe this story, you're not going to believe that it's real.
I don't even know what's going on, but yeah, I think it was meant to make her be portrayed as like this innocent girl who sees sex as this horrible thing.
And she kept stumbling over the word like pornography, like it's pornographical.
And this was when I was worried. Like in the beginning, I'm like, oh, they're going to make us look like ignorant, brainwashed little girls. Like I thought that's how the missionaries would be portrayed. And I'm grateful that that wasn't my takeaway at all. And like the sisters actually play a really strong role. And I think it was portrayed more accurately. So in the beginning, it sounds like it was horrible, but it gets better. I promise.
It doesn't get better. It's so stupid.
The movie, we're talking about two different things. I'm talking about the representation of our culture and our faith. I actually feel like it was represented in a pretty fair way.
Yeah, there's only 2 or 3 things that are like hint at them not actually being LDS, like the creators. They kind of miss like 2 things that are pretty obvious.
Yeah. So we're talking about 2 different things because like it doesn't get better in the sense that it was a good movie or that you were like entertained and loved it the whole time. It gets so much worse in that sense for you, but for me it gets better in that we were represented in a way that I liked more.
That makes sense.
You go throughout the movie.
Okay, and we'll continue to review it that way. I'll attack it as a movie.
Yeah, you'll get 2 very different perspectives.
The scariest part of the whole movie happens in like the first 10 minutes. They run into some girls on the street.
Oh my gosh.
And the girls on the street are like, "Can we take a picture with you?" And they're posing, and then one of the girls goes, "Do you really have magic underwear?" And they pants her, and then you see her garment bottoms.
Yeah, she's wearing the Karenessa.
And that was the scariest part of the movie for me.
Yeah, Tanner was so caught off guard when that happened. He was like, "Oh my."
Because it's like not something you think about. You walk through the mall and you see Victoria's Secret and you're like, okay, that's what the underwear looks like. But then when you never see another
sacred garments,
another person, another woman in garments, it was just like caught me so off guard. Was not ready for that.
Yeah.
So that I think will frustrate
That's kind of a theme. The magic underwear gets brought up multiple times, and they never really like correct the meaning of garments, but I didn't expect them to.
Well, I kind of think that's funny because like I feel like I've joked about magic underwear with like my friends, and so it's like it is like a
common understanding,
common thing to be like, not that we are not reverent towards it, but it's kind of funny to use, you know, their jokes against them.
Totally. I remember when I went through the temple for the first time, and like I was home in Oklahoma, I went to a sleepover with all my high school friends, and I told them that I'd gone through the temple, and they're like, did you get the magic underwear? I'm like, do you want to see them? And just like playing it off like it was this crazy thing. So yeah, again, they're sacred, they're special. You guys know how I feel about my garments, but it was funny to see it that way.
Yeah, but that was the scariest part of the movie.
So then you see them walking, they're climbing the stairs, and one of the sisters makes the comment, don't worry, our husbands are getting hotter every flight we go up, which is a very true sentiment that you have on your mission.
Yeah, that was funny sitting next to you because I had my non-Mormon friend on my left and my wife on my right, and he kept saying things like, do you think they really did that? And then I was able to turn to you and be like, did you guys really do that on your mission? Did your husbands get hotter the harder that you worked? And
Totally.
if I had to guess, you gave up about halfway through your mission.
Okay, so again, these are all the fun, lighthearted parts that, again, in the Utah theater, everyone's laughing through. I don't know if they're funny to other people, but...
Yeah, so it's funny, we're kind of giggling, and then they get to Hugh Grant's house, and they lock their bikes outside, and they go and knock on the door, and he is, you know, you immediately know he's the bad guy. The movie's music gets intense, and it gets darker, and he invites them inside, and they say, oh, you know, is there a woman, is your wife home? Mm-hmm. We can't come in without that. And I think that I guess probably a lot of people that have experience with missionaries would maybe know that that's a thing. That doesn't seem like a thing that you'd only know if you were like deep in Mormon culture. But I thought that was pretty funny because I've never seen that represented in pop culture. And at this point, it still feels like outside of the condom talk, it still feels like a church thing.
Yeah. No, and they were spot on about that. It's just not safe. We don't go into strangers' homes without a female present if you're a woman, the other way around if you're a male.
I guess what I would say is when I was on my mission, we would say, look, is your husband home? Is there a male home? And as soon as you got a yes, it was like, okay, we're coming in. We're doing this because you're so excited. Yeah,
and that's what the sisters did. Like, they didn't need to prove the point that the wife was there. He said yes, and so they trusted him, and they walked into that house.
Yeah, maybe all potential missionaries should watch this movie first as like a warning. We should make your sister watch it before she leaves for Paris.
Before you go into the home.
Yeah, pause
physically.
It. They showing it at the MTC, and they pause it, and they're like, what did they do wrong? So he tells them that his wife is baking a blueberry pie, and they get really excited. And they sit down, and he brings a candle and 2 big glasses of Coke. And I know you were probably just as curious as I was. I was like, are they going to say something about caffeine and Coca-Cola? And sure enough,
they did.
He offers it to them, and then he's like, this is when you kind of pick up the vibe that something's not right. He's like, oh, wait, you're not allowed to do this. Or is that just coffee?
Well, he's like, because of your word of wisdom. Like, he knows a lot.
Oh, yeah. And they're like, actually, that's when the sister, okay, so it's important to understand that Sister Barnes is like a new missionary. Or she's
sorry, you haven't switched. Sister Barnes is the older sister who's more experienced and has had many baptisms. Sister Paxton is the new.
Oh yeah, they did make that joke, which made their eagerness to go in like make more sense, because right before that, Sister Paxton's like, I haven't had any baptisms. I just want to convert one person.
Well, it's funny, like they call it like a convert. I think, I don't know. They like use the proper lingo, and I remember thinking like, wow, they really did the research.
Yeah. And then, so they get in there, and they talk about the caffeine, and Sister Barnes is like, actually, caffeine is not part of the word of wisdom. But the sisters are both reluctant to like drink something in a stranger's home. And then he kind of launches into this, he goes to his closet and pulls out like a really huge Book of Mormon that is like filled with bookmarks. Mm-hmm.
And they get eager.
Yeah, they're like excited, like, oh, he's like an eternal investigator. Like, this is going to be awesome.
Or he's so ready.
what causes their hesitancy where they ask for his wife again? Because that's like the next story beat.
They start talking about polygamy, which again,
Oh, no.
I did not see this coming.
So Hugh Grant launches into this like dialogue about the angel Moroni appearing to Joseph Smith and the golden plates, and it's like stuff that pop culture would tend to stay away from references like this because nobody's gonna get it. But he's just like diving in, and then it gets really uncomfortable when he just asks the sisters, he's like, can I ask you something that is very awkward? And they're like,
you can ask.
Sure, I guess we won't know if we're uncomfortable until you ask. And then he goes, what do you think about polygamy?
But the way that he frames it is pretty strong, because he frames it as in like, so Joseph Smith received revelation from God. Like, you're saying that he didn't have any desire to be married to younger women. Like, he's pulling out.
He made it about sex. He was like,
totally.
Joseph wants sex with more women, so he created polygamy. And then the states, the America pushes against it, and all of a sudden the revelation comes out that it's not necessary anymore.
Yeah, so he's critical of our history of polygamy.
Yeah, and it's like a very common like
very common
argument.
In response to his polygamy comments, Sister Barnes responds with talking about the need to procreate and create more members for the church to have a stronger base, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I think it's a common fallacy with missionaries is they try to, I experienced this on my mission, they try to kind of logic their way through some things. Mm-hmm. And I wish I could go back in time, because I was guilty of that as well. And I wish that she would have said it was revelation from God and he obeyed.
Yeah. And that's true, because, well, how do you know that was revelation for God? Well, you have to know that he's a prophet. And how do you know that he's a prophet? Well, you have to read the Book of Mormon.
Yeah, it's a very simple thing, and I think that she overcomplicated it a little bit, and she was like, well, there are logical reasons. The church needed to grow. They had a lot more kids. It grew the church.
America was in war. Men were leaving. Men were going on missions.
And he starts to push back more, and that's when they're like, is your wife here? Because they're getting uncomfortable, and he's like, what's your favorite fast food?
This part is so weird.
And then Sister Paxson goes on this tirade about ranking all the fast foods, and she just does not stop talking, and my mouth is getting dry just thinking about it. She's like, oh, Burger King is better than Wendy's, which is better than this and this and this.
And we don't talk about Taco Bell.
Yeah, we don't talk about Taco Bell. And he's like, why don't we talk about Taco Bell? And then Sister Barnes gets like really defensive, and she's like, we just don't talk about it. And
this is the real
this
movie.
is a script that somebody wrote, and they're like, this is the movie. And it's not a red herring either. Like they call it Chekhov's gun.
What?
Do you want me to mansplain Chekhov's gun to you?
Yeah.
Chekhov's gun is this movie trope that states that if you show a gun early, it's going to be used later.
A foreshadow.
It's kind of a foreshadow, but it's Chekhov's gun. It's like this idea of like if you set something up, there has to be a reason for it. Which is so dumb, because the reason was so dumb and a huge plot hole.
Yeah. We'll come back to Taco Bell.
But now they're like, can you please go get your wife? And now they're feeling very uncomfortable because Sister Barnes made it uncomfortable by making it weird about Taco Bell. That's weird to just be like, you have to know your setting to just be with somebody that's like, please don't talk to me about Taco Bell. And you're like, you just killed the vibe in the room.
Yeah, like, are you okay?
Yeah. So he leaves, and he's like, yeah, come follow me. My wife is ready. And they're like, oh, we're going to...
We're going to take this call. A Relief Society president is calling us.
Yeah, they lie.
Mm-hmm. They give this white lie that they have to take this phone call, but of course he knows you can't receive a phone call. And they try to escape.
Well, this is funny because this is one of the things that they got wrong about our church. Is that they got it so close with like, oh, we have a call from the Relief Society president. But they made it sound like they had to check in with the Relief Society president every night, and that they had to return to their church. And like, I never went back to the church. I only went to the church on Sundays.
She said they were expecting us for something, which you could always like
their chores
correlation or something could be during the week. Yeah, the chores thing was weird too.
And that old elder was weird, but it could be like
no, that doesn't make sense, because even if you were
Okay, well, let's explain what
You would have a
happened.
companion.
So they try to break out, and they realize that the door is locked. And then they start to really panic, and the phone doesn't work, and there's this tiny window, and they're like, can you squeeze through that? And they're like, let's just go ask him for help getting out of here.
Yeah, if we can leave.
They also realize he took their coats, and the bike lock key was in one of the sisters' jackets pockets. So, like, we can't even leave until we get our coats, so we have to go talk to him. So they, again, at this point, I'm like, this is so awesome. This is such a cool setup. And the slow burn had, like, started.
And for me, I'm just sitting here like, okay, what would I do if I was them in this situation as a sister missionary? Like, I'm just intrigued thinking about, okay, I've been in this position before, or like I felt uncomfortable in like ways that I would respond. Obviously, I was never locked into someone's house and couldn't get out, but like that's where my interest in the movie is.
I think it's crazy that the situation seems so plausible that we send such young kids out there. I've always heard that it's such a testimony that the church is true, that
Totally.
it continues to grow with
The people we send out,
the people that we send out,
that we
these
send
dumb
out.
kids. I was a dumb kid.
I was one too.
I didn't even do my own laundry till my mission. I didn't even read the Book of Mormon till the MTC.
That's embarrassing.
I didn't know.
No, don't even share this. When I heard this fact about you, I was like, are you kidding me?
I didn't know that God and Jesus actually appeared to Joseph Smith. I had never heard the first vision. I was born and raised in the church.
That like stresses me out for like Utah wards. I'm like, what? You're telling me that no one ever taught you that?
That was probably a little bit my own fault.
Just never caught on.
Because obviously they show you that in primary and stuff.
You would think.
Yeah, but I probably was
Like,
like,
sing songs about it for sure.
yeah, I didn't ever sing. I was got in trouble for not singing. I should have sang.
And yet the Lord's work goes on and it continues to grow.
Yeah, I had a very successful mission for somebody who was so stupid.
You and me both.
That's where you just like, it doesn't work to logic your way through it. You have to trust that the Holy Spirit is real. And that was another thing where I'm like, where's the Holy Spirit here? Why isn't it warning these girls? It's because they're
I feel like
watching
you could tell.
pornographical.
No, I feel like you
videos.
could tell they were uncomfortable. I'm like, and this is my thought process watching the movie. Like, oh, they're getting that prick. Like, they're thinking that they're in an uncomfortable situation. Which, like, just going back to my mission, anytime I was in a position where I was uncomfortable, like, it was so obvious to me to, like, change or, like, make a move out of there in some way. I was never in danger. But there were times where I felt uncomfortable and was just like, okay, I'm going to take that as my time to leave. Did you ever feel like you were in danger on your mission?
I mean, we got held up at knife point, but even then I wasn't very stressed out. But the one time that I felt we have to get out of here was when this lady showed up with this baby at this family's house. It was like their estranged daughter, and she was like maniacal. And she was sobbing and saying like, take this baby, I can't have this baby, I'm gonna hurt it or something. And the family was like, you need to give her a blessing. And so this is my first area, and I was so stressed out. And he handed the baby to like the brother who didn't have his shirt on, and we're giving her this blessing, and I'm so stressed out. My companion's saying the blessing, and I'm hearing this like wincing, and I open my eyes and I look over, and the baby had like bit down on his nipple like he was trying to breastfeed it. And then I was like, what am I doing here? But I don't think that was the Spirit.
You were like, I went
home and prayed really hard. I'm like, these tell me that I'm needed here. But that's a story for another time. So they go down the hallway looking for him, and it's really scary and suspenseful.
It is scary. I was covering my eyes.
And they get into this study, this like library. And he's there, and there's these two doors, and there's like church pews. And he's playing music, and they're like, their coats are on the pew, and they kind of eyeball their coats. And then when she looks at her coats, she looks down and sees this letter opener, this like small sword. Chekhov's gun. It has to come back later. And they're like, can you help us get out of here? And he's like, you're free to leave whenever you want. Here's these two doors.
And they're like, we'd like to go out the front door, please.
Yeah, and then he's like, oh, they're on a timed lock. I can't open it.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is cool. At this point, I'm still stoked and invested. And he's like, you guys can leave. You have to go through one of these doors. And they hesitantly open the door, and it's just like basement stairs, cellar stairs into darkness.
No, you've fast forwarded way too much. We need to talk about his whole monologue about religion.
I think
we need to talk
no,
about belief
they
and
open the
disbelief.
doors before he writes belief and disbelief.
No, they don't.
Yeah, because they know that that's the way out, and then they shut the door, and they're like, will you help us? And he's like, I'll help you. Do you really want my help? And that's when he writes belief and disbelief. I think that's why it was important, because they saw that they were both steps outside, and he's like, my house is on a cliff. This is the way out. That he didn't say that after he writes that stuff and goes on his monologue. It's when they have to ask for help. Because that's how it makes sense, because then he says, so he's like, do you want my help? They're like, which door do we take? Do you want my help? And they're finally like, okay, we want your help. And then he sits them down and he takes out Monopoly.
He gives his main argument for why religion is fake. And he starts with giving the game of Monopoly. He's like, you've heard of Monopoly? And they're like, yes, of course. And then he's like, well, have you heard of this game? And he brings up this game that is the original Monopoly, but was created before Monopoly. Do you know what it was called?
It's called like Landowner or something.
Yeah, it literally was Monopoly. It was
a woman
had designed it. Yeah, a woman had designed this game, and the people who created Monopoly had essentially just stolen it from her and made millions and millions of dollars off of it, but it wasn't the original. And then now, since Monopoly, we have dozens and dozens of renditions of Monopoly. So he then says, okay, Monopoly is essentially Judaism. No, Catholicism.
Yeah, and it's a spin-off of Judaism, which would be the original religion.
Yeah, Judaism would be the original.
And he starts pulling out all their different Bibles. He pulls out the Torah, and he pulls out the Quran, and he pulls out the
and he
Catholic
puts them next
Bible.
To all of their Monopoly games, saying, like, essentially religion is just a copy and paste of different...
They're just different
theologies,
iterations.
yeah, different interpretation, all of the same thing.
And then he pulls out the new Monopoly, which is crypto Monopoly or whatever, and he throws it on the table, and he's like, and then there's your religion, yeah, which is like a strange offshoot of all the rest.
And super young and new.
Which was funny. That was another thing that stood out to me as, like, there's two types of plot holes. There's like the regular script plot holes, and then there's the Mormon plot holes. And he tries to say that the Book of Mormon was an iteration, but he never talked about the facts that the Book of Mormon is a New Testament of Jesus Christ of the people in America. Mm-hmm. When the Quran, the Torah, the Catholic Bible, the King James Version, all these different versions are literally iterations from the Torah.
True. And
then the Book of Mormon would be like a completely different game, but it's also a game. It shouldn't have been the crypto Monopoly. It should have been like Jenga, because it's like it's still a game,
but that would have taken too much explanation for the average watcher.
Yeah, but then he looks right at the missionaries and he's like, I've studied all religions and I've found the truth. And you're like, well, you kind of missed the fact that the Book of Mormon actually kind of missed this really important.
Like, actually, I know the answer to this. If you would read the Book of Mormon and pray to know if it was true, then you would know. That,
the
all
Book
these
of Mormon
iterations,
is proof that the iterations,
and they kind of talk about that. She brings up Joseph Smith. She's like, well, fascinatingly, like Joseph Smith also researched a lot of religions.
Yeah, she's like, you're just like Brother Joseph.
Yeah.
Well, then he tries to make this argument that Judaism makes up 0.2% of the population, and so what happened to the original? It was stolen by the Catholic Church, similar to Monopoly.
He also brings up the multiple Christs.
There's not multiple Christs, but the argument that he makes, there's this like really scary curtain behind them with like a person.
Yeah, that is scary. I was scared every time it panned.
I was like excited, and then the curtain comes down and it's just like a statue.
Oh, I didn't see that part. See, I honestly had my eyes closed for a good portion of the movie.
It's just a statue, and it's like, okay. But on the wall, he had like all these holy paintings of like Shiva and Egyptian paintings of Ra and Ravana and like all these other gods from all these other religions. And he goes into this a tirade about how Jesus Christ wasn't even original, that Shiva was born of a virgin mother, that Ra died and was resurrected 3 days later. And he tries to make this argument that Jesus was like, the idea of Jesus was stolen from all these other religions. But the only thing I could think of watching that is I was like, isn't it so cool that there are so many pieces of Old Testament Christ throughout history that my thought process went,
so many cultures,
put your head in like a early religion before mainstream Christianity. And there's ideas that the Savior is going to be born of a virgin. And then it makes sense that they would like create one to be like, oh, he never came. Well, here he is, even though he hadn't come yet.
I totally agree.
So he tries to use this as like, your religion is false. And Sister Barnes gives like a really incredible rebuttal.
Totally.
And she's like, you kind of missed the point with all of this. Like, these obviously aren't renditions of Jesus Christ. She points out that one of them has the head of a bird and talks about how ridiculous that is. And she's like, your argument for Judaism falls apart. You completely disregard the Holocaust and all those things that happened, the persecution of Jews, which is why it's such a small part of the population today. Kind of logics her way through it.
Yeah, and I was grateful for that. I'm not saying that like she actually gave like solid rebuttals. Like, yeah, she had an approach, like she had a response to what he was saying, but it just showed and proved that she was educated. Like, she was she had learned a lot, and she like was making her choices, and rather than just being brainwashed or like having like these copy and paste answers. And that was a true representation of missionaries to me. And both Sister Paxton will have her moment later, but I think both of the sisters were great in that.
Her moment later, the most ridiculous thing ever.
But it just shows that they were like real smart individuals who also were able to stand up for themselves.
Let me lay down a Chekhov's gun that will come back later in this episode. Sister Paxton is painted as an imbecile.
Yeah.
She's like dumb.
You think she's, yeah.
And that will come back later when she gets her moment.
So the sisters then just start debating with each other, and Sister Paxton's like, well, you have obviously proved to us that the disbelief door is the correct door to go through.
This is when he does that. This is when he says, okay, I'll help you leave. He takes some chalk and he writes belief on one door and disbelief on the other door. And he's like, you need to choose. And Sister Paxton is like, okay, we'll go through the disbelief door. Like, you're very smart man, and you've shown us that we're wrong.
Thank you for your education and for what you've enlightened us with.
Yeah.
Like, she's like praising him.
But this is just so ridiculous. Sister Barnes is like, no, he's testing us. Sister Paxton, do you still believe in God? And she's like, yes. So she's like, we need to go through the belief door.
One thing that we haven't mentioned that also happened in this scene that I really liked is Sister Barnes does say, she's like, you want us to pick between disbelief and belief as if it's all or nothing. And she says it's a spectrum. And for me, that resonated with me because like, that's how I would say majority of us feel is like, yes, I have faith and I have belief in so many things, but are there things that I have questions or like don't understand or wouldn't have a good response to? Absolutely.
Yeah, the important thing to remember here is that the bad guy is the one who's trying to paint it as black and white.
Totally. That's so true.
Yeah. So that's what was cool too from like a Mormon culture perspective is that like even though he does make compelling arguments against the church, he's also a homicidal serial killer. So it's like, who you're going to trust?
Yeah. At the end of the day, it does not paint the church in a negative way or belief in a negative way because he's the bad guy, obviously.
Yeah, the message is up for interpretation.
Well, like,
and we'll
I just
get to
feel
that.
like I thought that it was going to be like, oh, like people who have belief in Mormons specifically, like they don't know anything. I don't know. I guess I keep saying the same thing over and over again. I don't need to reiterate that, but it wasn't. It was overall, it was like belief is, I don't know. You're a psychopath.
Belief will save you from a serial killer.
And if you're on Reddit the takeaway is like, if you are not anti-Mormon, but if you're just like atheist, whatever, and you're on Reddit trying to give all of these arguments, it's like, look who you're siding with. You look stupid. We have responses. We've thought through these things. Like, don't treat us like we aren't free thinkers and we've like looked into stuff on our own.
Yeah. It's funny. I've been thinking about this a lot lately for some reason, maybe because of this movie, but when were we told growing up in the church that the worst possible thing you could do is deny your belief in God? I feel like I had so many scenarios when I was younger. I don't know who told them to me, but it was my dad, maybe, where he was like, if there was a serial killer pointing a gun at my head,
oh my gosh,
and he was like, deny God or I'll shoot you, I would not deny God. And I'm like, or I'm thinking like, if there was a serial killer with a gun to like your kids' heads, and he was like,
okay, those are two different scenarios. If it was pointed at my head, honestly, I would be like, I don't deny God. But if it was pointed at my child's head, I'd deny God very fast.
I think God looks at that situation though, and he's like, do what you got to do, man. I know I won't hold it against you. He can see our heart. He either can see our heart or can't.
But you realize that happens in the Book of Mormon all the time and in the Bible.
That's where I think that they had a very different, it was going to be written down and shared with hundreds of thousands of people later. My story's not.
It could be.
It could be. Maybe.
If you were then thrown into the fire and then an angel appeared with you in the fire, that's why that story got written down.
Yeah, luckily I'm not a prophet. So if a serial killer's holding a gun to my head or your head and they're like, deny God, I'd be like, who? You gonna let us go? Anyways, they choose the
people that listen
door.
to my podcast for spiritual uplifting, like, this is not the episode. I'm sorry.
It's spiritually uplifting because what is anything that is of good
rapport. Yeah.
Rapport. We seek after these things.
Everything that is good, virtuous.
Yeah, lovely or of good rapport. This thing wasn't good or lovely.
No.
It was a bad movie. Don't go see it. See, that's uplifting. Now you know what to seek after. Okay, so they go down the belief side, and it turns out both doors lead to the same area. It's like this scary cellar. I'm just going to fly through this part because it just couldn't get more ridiculous.
Can I just say, both doors led to the same place, and that's reality. No matter what you believe or don't believe, we're all going to the same place.
Oh, good insight. Yeah. That is good. I didn't think about that.
True or not? Let's say I die and I find out that the church isn't true. Like, first off, I'd be a little shocked. I guess like my belief in Christ is so rooted that like I like have a hard time even saying that Christ isn't real. I get to the other side and Christ is like, hey, actually, like this was the path that I wanted you to take. I'd be like, hey, Christ, where are we going?
That's an actual philosophical idea. I can't remember who came up with it, but he was an atheist who eventually like rationalized that it's just better for him to believe in God. Because if there is one, he's good, and if there's not, then it didn't matter.
Yeah, logically, that makes sense.
Yeah. So they get down there, and I want to preface this by saying at this point, I am still so invested. This slow burn is like working on me, and I am loving it. I even turned to my buddy on my left, and I was like, this is so good, because it is so scary.
As soon as they got down to that basement, my eyes were covered. I don't think I opened my eyes for the next 45 minutes.
So they get down there, there's a table and a chair, and it's kind of drippy and celery. Cellarly. And this, he goes over this intercom, and he's like, I am now going to show you the one true God. I'm going to show you a prophetess of God. She's going to come in, and then this scary witch comes down, and she's carrying a blueberry pie. And he's like, you're going to witness a miracle. I put poison in this pie, and she's going to die. She's going to eat it. She's going to die, and she's going to come back to life. And this lady is like zombie, like totally scary and face bleeding. She eats this pie with her hands, and then she face plants into the pie. And he's like, feel her pulse. Make sure she's dead. They do that. They verify that she's dead. And then they run up to the door to like bang on it and get out. And then they go back down, and Sister Paxton, the dumb one, is like, she moved. her body moved. And Sister Barnes like, no, she didn't. She's dead. And she's like, I know she moved. And then they try to climb out and they pull off this wood board with nails in it. And the camera does this really slow zoom in. And at this point, I'm like, oh,
all
okay.
of the things that I missed because I was not watching it. I could hear everything, but I didn't see any of these visuals.
Yeah, you didn't see the board with the nails in it.
I did not.
Not like a cross board. It was like a board with like 4 nails, like a board specifically designed to hit somebody in the head with. So,
what? I mean, like, we're not going to get scary. Like, we're not going to try to... Don't describe it in a way that is gruesome or that is scary. Like, let's just get through the facts because I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable listening.
I'll fly through this. I think that it's... Okay, I'll fly through this, okay? It all of a sudden cuts to the church.
Yeah.
And there's a single elder by himself cleaning a bathroom, and he looks on the chart, and it says, like, make sure to sign in when you're done with your chores. And, like, he recognizes that their signature wasn't there. So he goes looking for them. He ends up at this guy's house. Hugh Grant goes to the door, and he's like, oh, no, I haven't seen them anywhere, but let me know if you need some help looking. And the elder's like, oh, no, it's okay. And then he goes back, and they're trying to get the matches, and it's super intense. And then the doorbell rings again, and you're like, oh, the elder listened to the spirit. And then he's like, I just would feel really weird if I left without asking if you've read this pamphlet before. And he hands him, like, the restoration pamphlet. So that was pretty funny. Everybody was laughing. So they're trying to smoke out this cellar, and all of a sudden the witch is, like, standing right behind them, and it's this jump scare. And then he's like, then he comes back, and he goes down there, and he's like, thank you, prophetess, you've shown them this miracle. Oh, but before he comes down, the prophetess, he's like, she's going to tell you what the afterlife is like. And the prophetess is like, there's a conductor, and there's clouds, but they're not real, and none of it is real. And this is important because that's almost word for word what she said. And then he tells her that she can be excused. He goes down and he takes out a notepad and he's like, tell me everything. You just witnessed a miracle. Let's document it. People will research this for forever. This is when it just goes completely off the rails. Sister Paxton is like, or Sister Barnes, the smart one, is like, I know that this whole thing is fake because when I was in high school, I ate Taco Bell and got E. coli and died. And when I died, for a couple minutes, I saw a conductor and clouds, and I felt that none of it was real. So I know.
Really? That's what happens?
Yes.
Like she says the same thing that the prophetess said?
Yeah. Huge plot hole. Because I'm excited because I'm like, oh.
He knows about
I'm starting
life.
to think that the movie's getting supernatural. I'm like, maybe these sister missionaries are in hell, which would have been a way better twist. I don't know what they did to go to hell, but it would have been a way better twist if they were like in purgatory and he's like making them relive some of their experiences. They literally never address it again. How did he know what her near-death experience was? To tell the witch to tell them that.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Huge pothole, never addressed ever again. So before he leaves, another Sister Paxton is like, stab him in the neck when he comes down here with the letter opener.
Sister Barnes tells Sister Paxton to do that.
Yeah, she's like, stab him in the neck, and the secret code word is magic underwear. When I say that, you stab him in the neck. Mm-hmm. So now he comes down. She's like, this is a bunch of crap because this is why we don't talk about Taco Bell. I got E. coli, and this is just a magic trick. And they're like totally setting it up for her to say magic underwear. And now he's standing between them, and she goes, just like our magic underwear. And then he slices her neck because Sister Paxton chickens out.
No, it happened so fast.
Okay, another plot hole. Like, how did he know that was the code word? Why was he waiting till she said magic underwear to cut her neck?
Yeah, I don't know.
So she falls down, she bleeds out, and then this, like, I'm not making this up.
Descriptive.
No, people need to hear this. This is the most ridiculous movie ever. He then carves an IUD out of her arm and is like, this is why she will not resurrect because she has this, and she's part of the simulation because this is a microchip.
And you're like, oh, you're literally a psychopath.
Yeah, I'm like, this guy is floundering. Like this, I'm like, at this point, I'm like,
yeah, this doesn't look good.
I don't think this movie's gonna have a good payoff.
Yeah. And so Sister Paxton is like, oh, well, the reason why she had this in her arm is actually because it's birth control. And he's like, but you didn't know that she had birth control. And she's like, well, yeah, because it probably would have been embarrassed. She would have been embarrassed to let people know.
She specifically says that the church would have shamed her.
Which is not true. That's just like a weird misconception too.
And it was funny because I lean over to my buddy who's a dude. And he's like, what is that? Is that a microchip? Are they really in a simulation? And I'm like, I remember hearing something a long time ago about IUDs in their arm, and I lean over to Lauren and I go, what is that? Is that like a contraceptive thing? And she's like, yeah. Then I turn to Jamie and I'm like, it's an IUD. And he's like, what? No, it's not. So this is where the whole movie falls apart. All of a sudden,
that sister missionary is dead. Sister Barnes is dead.
Yeah. Or is she? Sister Paxton does like, all of a sudden she's Sherlock Holmes and she's like, you switched the bodies out on us. And there is another door here. And she dumps the table over and water goes into like a trap door on the ground. Mm-hmm. Like straight out of Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah. All of a sudden she's a genius.
Genius. Lifts up the door and she's like, there's a dead body down there. And he's like, there's only one way to find out. And I'm going to show you God. The one true God. Mm-hmm. And then she goes down into the basement and there's like devil stuff everywhere, which is another plot hole because anyways, she gets to the end of this corridor and she finds this room with all these women locked in cages dressed like nuns. And Hugh Grant shows up and he's like, the one true religion is control.
No, she knew that. She realized it. She says, your whole thing is to show at me that
you're in control.
That, yeah, you've been in control of this whole situation.
And he's like, that's right. It's all control. And that was when I was like, okay, this is the dumbest movie I've ever seen. Because it doesn't make any sense. What's his point? If he's going to kill him.
That's why it's so funny, is because this whole movie revolves around literally this man who is atheist and believes that all religion is control. I
did read one comment on Reddit, on this subreddit, the movie review subreddit, and the top comment was, this is the worst movie ever. The main villain is the human personification of a Reddit atheist argument.
Spot on.
That's it. That's his whole thing.
Oh my gosh.
There's not even a murder house.
It's even like more specific to like ex-Mormons too. Like I feel like it really is like not everyone, but people that I talk to on social media, and that's just the villain of the show. And that's why it's like weirdly realistic, but also like what? But also not realistic at all because he's a sociopath.
It just falls apart at the end because you're like, what is the message that you're trying to, what is the message? Like, religion bad, that seems to be very trendy in like modern Hollywood, but religion bad is like the serial killer who is obviously pure evil. He chases her out and he stabs her in the stomach and she slits his throat. And while they're both dying, he's like, pray for us. And then the sister missionary launches into this whole thing about how prayer doesn't work.
Yeah, that was weird.
That was when I was like, just eye rolling so hard I got a headache. She's like, prayer doesn't work, but we should do it because it's good to think about other people. I think that was to prove that like he was effective. I think that was because if at the beginning of the movie, if you would have asked Sister Paxton if prayer worked, she would have been like, of course. It was just a different person. I think it was
to just prove that he got her to some extent, like question to the point where she was like, this prayer is going to do nothing to help me.
Then he's like laying on her chest and she's praying for him. And the other sister missionary wakes up and smacks him in the head with the nails. And then the sister escapes into the daylight and like the movie rolls credits.
Yeah. Another thing that happens at the end is a butterfly comes and lands on her arm, her fingers to be specific. And earlier in the movie, she acts as if like we believe in reincarnation and that like when she comes back, she wants to come in this form of a butterfly. That was something that was like, okay.
That was maybe another insight having grown up in Mormon culture and like being able to see these like huge glaring plot holes. It reminds me of David Archuleta leaving the church and then coming out with his new song, Let's Go to Hell Together. Like, dude, he was in the church for a long time. He knows that we don't believe in hell. It's just like, was his whole thing fake? So yeah, she's like, if when I come back, I'm going to come back as a butterfly so that my loved ones know that I'm there.
Yep. And then there's that butterfly at the end, as if it's Sister Barnes, but then it's like, oh, actually, you might be dead. And I think that's the conclusion we've come to, that she actually did die.
She died, and that the sister missionary was an angel.
Yeah, it was her conductor.
And it's because it's also daytime when they leave, which they
the
got there
the
right at like 6 p.m. when the sun was setting, because they had the 5 p.m. check-in, and that's what made the elder. And the whole thing definitely did not take place over 12 hours.
Definitely.
But it's like bright sun, and then it fades to white, and
yeah, so she's dead.
That's the end. So what did you get out of it?
I hated it. As far as, like, again, I hate horror. I would not recommend this movie ever. It was just fascinating to see my culture on display this way, and my beliefs.
It could have been PG-13.
I think so too.
I don't know why it was rated R. Even when getting hit in the head, it literally flashed on this. There wasn't even like gore. Like the witch lady vomits blood, but like, is that enough for an R rating?
I was thinking, like, this was a better experience than watching it in my home, because I get to go home to my sanctuary. And when I watch scary movies at home, it feels like it penetrates my house a little bit, and then I feel like in my home. But like, this was like, okay, see a movie theater. So that was just one insight that I had about watching scary movies.
Like the devil's just outside waiting, and he's like, come on, watch a scary movie so I can come in.
No, not like that at all.
The spirit is like, I'm out of here.
No, the energies that those movies give off is something that I do not care to have in my home. But going back, did it make you question your faith at all? Were there any arguments that you were like,
No, absolutely not. It was it's very surface level stuff. Like, obviously, the polygamy thing could set somebody off if they'd never heard about that before, but that's something that we all try to understand, know, and rationalize. The argument for Christ, I just thought that was cool. Like, I didn't know that the Indian god Shiva was born of a virgin mother, and that to me is just evidence that the Savior is real, and that Jehovah of the Old Testament had, way more impact. If he really was, from the beginning with Adam and Eve, there should absolutely be evidences of the prophecies.
Especially in our belief where we say God was giving revelation to prophets throughout the world, right? We have the Old Testament, but we believe that there are other scripture, and that's where we get the Book of Mormon and others throughout the world. So it makes sense if God was giving this revelation to cultures and different groups around the world, that like there would be little renditions of these truths.
Yeah, I wanted to jump out of my seat and into the screen and explain to Hugh Grant that Quetzalcoatl is Jesus Christ. Quetzalcoatl is when the Spaniards invaded America, the indigenous people were more than willing to let them come in, because they were promised that Quetzalcoatl, the white bearded man, would return. And like, that's an actual part of history. And it's like, oh, I wonder, is there anywhere where you have a history of, Jesus Christ visiting the Americas and with a beard and promising that he will return? And Quetzalcoatl's cool because he's the feathered serpent. And I've always loved that Christ told his disciples to be quick like a snake, but peaceful like a dove. He described himself that way in the Bible.
I remember on my mission in Vancouver, I went and met with the chief of a tribe, the First Nation tribe, because we had to get permission to proselyte on their territories. And when I was talking to him, first off, it was like a tiny little miracle. We went to the office, we didn't have an appointment, and he was in a meeting, and we could see him at this big table, and she was like, his receptionist was like, oh, he has a flight, and he's leaving right after this meeting, so you'll have to schedule for later. And I was like, oh, okay. And like, as we were talking with her, he came out to use the bathroom, and I was like, could we speak to you for briefly? And he's like, yeah, sure. And like, I talked to him briefly about the Book of Mormon and how we believe that Christ came to the Americas. And he was like, oh yeah, like we absolutely believe in a savior that was in America. And just talking to him about their history, their tribe's history, and their understanding, it was cool to see it come back to, well, we have this record and it's in the Book of Mormon, and to make that connection with him. So I don't know, it's everywhere.
Disney's Hercules? You're telling me the son of a god was made mortal and came to earth to fight Hades' death? And only once he conquered death was he welcomed back to heaven? Did you know that Hercules is Jesus Christ? That's one of my favorite ones.
Everything points to Christ.
But then you have this Redditor who's like, actually, Jesus Christ is just a ripoff of Hercules. And you just want to be like, no, it goes the other way.
Yeah. Another aspect of this that he doesn't talk about is like everything has to be evidence-based or everything has to be logically understood. And faith plays a very crucial, important part in our belief. I don't think you can ever logically prove all of your concerns away. Like at the end of the day, there will still be questions, and Satan knows that there's reasonable reasons to doubt. And that's why it's so important to understand what faith looks like and to have faith in some of those things.
Yeah, it's why faith and hope are always used together in the Book of Mormon. Because if you just had a logical outlook on life, logically you're screwed. Outside of religion, logically it's a scary world to raise children. Logically, your marriage probably won't make it. The data shows that, but faith is such an integral part, and it's the hope. It's like Hugh Grant type characters like to draw this line that like faith is useless and that you should be able to logic and reason through everything. But if you're having a bad day, just this belief that it'll get better, or this belief that you'll be able to lure 2 sister missionaries into your house and kill them for your own gain, that's faith. You showed faith.
That's disgusting.
That his plan would work. But I want to point out the fallacy there, that like faith is hope, and it's wanting something better. It's expecting, believing that's something better. And so it's not a hard draw for me to then say that it's okay to have faith and that be my answer to some of these questions that I don't have answers to.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm willing to believe that tomorrow will be a better day than today, then I can also believe that could potentially go on forever. It's not that big of a jump.
Yeah.
This movie is the biggest waste of time, but I will say there is something really fun about representation.
Yeah.
Being represented in a way that wasn't necessarily to make fun of.
Well, first for us.
That's why I'm like, I don't know what the message of that movie is. The critic, the one critic that I read and when I saw the original trailer was like, this is such a good view, such a poignant view of modern day viewpoints on religion. And you're like, what? Are you citing? I don't know, I've seen the movie. I'm like, somebody should check in on that guy.
I think a lot of people would feel that way. I think a lot of people who have chosen to step away from religion, even in our religion especially, a lot of people would feel validated in his arguments. Yeah,
but that's my point, is like, if you want somebody to feel validated and see themselves in a character, you don't make him the homicidal maniac serial killer. Yeah. It's like, at the end of the day, that's who you're siding with. You want to be like...
Maybe that's why we liked it. I mean, like, that's why I liked the representation overall, because we're still on the good side.
Yeah, it's like, see, he was right. It's like, oh my gosh, he cut that lady's finger off. Like, that's not right, my friend. It's like, well, some of his beliefs are correct. Well... let's keep an eye on FBI right here. No, because you look at it like, okay, let's just say for a second that the director wanted to point out that like all religion is control. It's like they want to make this point to compare these sister missionaries to these religious women that he has trapped in cages. And he's like, they're on here on their own belief.
Mm-hmm.
But then like 5 seconds earlier, one of the women's like, help me.
Yeah. But I like what you were saying about faith and hope. It's so true. At the end of the day, if all of this isn't real, the life that I have is so beautiful and so fulfilled. Like, I genuinely don't think I could have it better outside of my faith. And that's not to say that people don't have great lives outside of my faith. I'm very content and happy where I am.
Yeah, and you never know. Like, it could lead to spiritual experiences. There's, documented people that got baptized and joined the church after seeing the Book of Mormon musical.
Yeah.
And the church had their famous advert on the back of the playbill. You've seen the play, now read the book. And what I think is special about this movie, if there is anything redeeming, is that it doesn't just skirt on like the stereotypical Mormon things that everybody would know, but he gets into some very specifics about the angel Moroni appearing to a young Joseph Smith at 15 years old, or whatever age he was.
It's funny when something like this happens, there's a wave on social media of members frantic and like, oh my gosh, that was horrible. That was so stupid. Horrible representation. Like, and I don't think that's ever necessary.
Yeah, and it's not fair to say like, oh, this is not a representation. Like, I think we should have all the representation, all different kinds. I had a kid in my mission that we went to, we had a 70 come and talk to us, and he did bring up the polygamy thing and kind of how to counter it. And his name was Elder Valladares, and his dad was a bishop, and he came straight up to me after the conference, and he was like, Joseph Smith had more than one wife? And I was like, yeah, have you never heard that before? And he's like, no. And then I explained it to him, but it's like, you could look at Elder Valladares and be like, that is not a good representation of
Yeah, that's so
Mormons.
true. You could pick two sisters out of my mission and put them in that movie, and it could have been horrible.
Yeah.
But those were real sisters in my mission.
There was a sister in my mission that took like 3 months off proselytizing because she had an ingrown toenail. And it's like, if they put that into a movie, you would be like, this is the worst representation.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, we're all over the place. Welcome to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Yeah,
it's a hospital for the sick.
Yeah, so true. Any representation is fine. The only place where you get me is where you try to say like what the belief is or like what the doctrine is when the doctrine is wrong. I'm like, please don't share that as if that's what I believe, because it's not. Because then I get people on social media that are like, oh, you actually don't know what you believe. I'm like, excuse you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very simple explanation. It's like the only time that you should say like, oh, that doesn't represent all of us, is if they're incorrectly saying I represent all of you.
Yeah.
Like, this is what all Mormons believe. It's like, hey, that's not a good representation. But this is such a funny story. There was another missionary on my mission. I just thought of him thinking about that Elder Valladares story. This is 100% real. He was from Venezuela, and we were visiting their apartment, and there were 4 missionaries there, and it was nighttime, and we were in our garments, and he was like, when do I get those? And we were like, what? Garments? He's like, yeah, don't I go through the temple? He was like 3 months in his mission. We called the Area 70. The next day, he was on a bus to the Buenos Aires temple to go take out his endowments.
Oh, my gosh.
So it's like, yeah, if that were in a movie, you'd be like, no, that's not right. That's actually not right. But
that's so
like,
true.
Whatever. Let the representation be skewed. Let the representation be he who is without sin cast the first stone. That's the better version of the representation.
It always, like, if anything, it will spark some curiosity. And curious brain can lead you so many places. So.
Yeah, and it's okay to say I don't know. That's a good representation. And I really loved
those sister missionaries. That's why it was so good, is because they're so likable and the acting was incredible.
Everybody in that movie is very talented.
Yeah.
Even the witch.
I was like, there's like 4 people in that movie.
Yeah, all 4 of them, except for the elder.
The elder was weird.
It was weird. He had like a wig, like a bad wig, and it was like blonde frosted tips.
Old. They try to make like this younger dude look old, and he's by himself. He's like this single old priest-looking elder. I feel like they were trying to give it like a Catholic priest vibe.
Totally. That was the other thing that kind of like didn't work, but
like that's not the case. So yeah, that was funny.
But yeah, the big takeaway is like, look, if this even converts one person, that's worth it. If somebody wants to know more about the angel Moroni and young Joseph, and
God's got good ways of working through us. He can make magic happen. Okay, it's not actually magic, but it's just like even my curiosity from watching the film, like even my interest in better understanding things.
It ties back to what we were talking about, is that the Holy Ghost is real. It is.
Yeah.
And you can trust in it. How many times on your mission did you bring investigators to a fast and testimony meeting where the members just literally went off on the most crazy, nonsensical, like
You just hold your breath.
backward stuff, and you're like this, and you're just sweating the whole time, and then you go up to the investigator and you're like, what did you think? And they're like, that was awesome. You gotta just trust that the Holy Ghost is real. Let it work on people.
And
don't go see this movie.
Don't.
We gave it to you in as much detail as possible. We did not make anything up. It is a bad movie.
And follow the guidelines that your mission president gives you to protect and keep you safe. You're going to be safe, and you're going to be okay. I don't want this to make moms and missionaries scared for their safety, because
they should be scared. Don't go in the house with a scary man.
Hugh Grant is not a scary man. He is an attractive, very charismatic man.
They did kind of pull that off. He was pretty scary. And I was worried about that because he played the villain in Paddington. And even then, you can't help but love him. Go watch Paddington. That is a way better movie.
Yeah, that's one of our favorites.
Paddington 1 and 2.
Well, thanks for joining us, you guys. I love you. Have a good week, and we'll see you next week.